Where I'm going to start, though, look, it's been a rough couple of days for Chris Hipkins, firstly launching their first policy in 2 years, Future Fund, that he says will grow the economy and fund infrastructure without new taxes. Critics say the pro-growth plan lacks detail and smacks of election year wishful thinking. Then yesterday, Labour's leader admitted he forgot that his health spokesperson was set to release a policy after being caught off guard when questioned about it. Aisha Verrill has written an article in New Zealand Doctor setting out the case for a new approach to funding GPs, which would see those decisions made by an independent body rather than the government, effectively creating an independent pricing authority that would be empowered to set prices based on data that comes from the practices on their costs, staffing, patient needs, service delivery, as well as sector-wide cost studies. The General Practice Owners Association, or GenPro, has cautiously welcomed the Labour Party's proposal. Dr Angus Chambers is chair of GenPro, and it's good to welcome him back on the show. Angus, good to see you again. It hasn't been that long.
No, well, hello. Thanks for inviting me.
Lovely to see you again. Now, Labour's proposal recommends removing Health New Zealand from the annual contract negotiation process and replacing it with an independent pricing system. You tentatively like the sound of this?
Yeah, well, the system we've got at the moment is led to the situation we're in, and it's clearly not capable of dealing with the situation if we want a thriving, sustainable general practice. So we definitely welcome the intent behind it to fix what has become quite an issue for both patients, general practices, and the system as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the goal is, they say, to deliver consistent data-driven funding. And Minister Verrill is basing this on, she's mentioned Australia's independent health and aged care pricing authority. Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't have a lot of knowledge about that.
Right. So it's a government agency that sets prices for public hospital services and aged care in Australia. In simple terms, it calculates how much hospitals and aged care providers should be paid for delivering their services based on cost data, staffing, and patient needs. So this is what she's referring to. So if it's based on staffing and patient needs, etc., does that mean, and you're, I know you probably read through what she's written, would that mean some doctors or GPs would end up with more funding than others?
Look, there's a whole lot of questions, and I think you mentioned the word setting prices. We would not be in favour of the government setting our prices, but getting the funding right is definitely something that would work well for patients and doctors and general practitioners, nurse practitioners for that matter. And already some doctors get more than others, and it's all based around the characteristics of your patient population or which system you're in. We've got two systems for funding general practice at the moment. One is called very low cost access practices, which has got some really big flaws in it. The aim of it is to keep patients' fees down, but some very wealthy individuals will be able to access that, and it's complete bad spending. And then just your general, what they're called access practices, but it's everybody else. So yes, at the moment, some doctors get more than others, and sometimes it's quite legitimate. If you've got a lot of elderly, or you get more money for looking after elderly, as opposed to a whole lot of healthy young people, they'll get more, and that is based on some patient characteristics. It's not actually sophisticated enough, and it's wildly out of date. But that is the situation at the moment.
Okay, because I suppose, let's just say if this is to happen, the idea, obviously there's still more details that we hope would come, but is the idea to attract more doctors to the to the industry? Because you and I have had multiple conversations about how you're struggling to get GPs in, with the ones that have been there a long time set to retire. And also to bring down the cost to patients, because I went last week and my doctor's now $85, eye-watering, for 15 minutes. So would this system bring down the price for patients? Because, I mean, that's what people want to see.
Yeah, look, your fees are almost as bad as going to a lawyer. So, yes, look, I think that is definitely that is definitely one of Labor's aims. And actually, I think lots of general practitioners and nurse practitioners would like to see fees come down. We don't actually want to have the barriers, but actually those prices are a reflection of the cost of providing the service. And so, look, I think that's one of the aims of this new body. But I think, well, the way I understand it, it's actually more about creating a sustainable funding system. We've got a system at the moment where we've got this kind of cost pressure analysis. It's grandly called, and it's a whole process called the annual statement of reasonable fees increase. And so there's a kind of a formula that takes some independent numbers like the labour cost index, health, and the producer price index, stuff like this. I can't even remember them. Anyway, and it spits out a number at the end of it. And then the government decides how much to put in, the government being Health New Zealand nowadays. And then depending on how much they put in, depending on how much the cost pressure analysis is, then they come up with an amount you're allowed to increase your fees. Now, over the decades, it's become apparent we've become less and less funded. And when you look at the number for cost pressure analysis as opposed to what the Health New Zealand or DHB's put in, we're around about 7% behind, which actually equates to tens of millions of dollars. And that's because they get this number and then they choose not to match it, and they expect patients to pay the balance. So we actually think the cost pressure analysis underestimates costs, and so we get constrained because we have a right to set our fees, but the government has a right to refer us to the Fees Review Committee if you exceed this allowable percentage increase. So when you've got not as much funding being put in as the cost pressure analysis suggests, the cost pressure analysis underestimating costs, patients also have a great deal, it's becoming harder and harder to pay, even if you do increase your fees by whatever you're allowed. It's just a kind of a perfect storm, really. So we need to change the system to get a more viable funding pathway forward. And so I that's why I say we welcome the intent of it, but exactly how this works out. And if you mentioned prices, well, if they were fixing prices, we wouldn't be favoured because we have absolutely no trust of anyone on that side of the table to actually be fair and reasonable over time.
So when she was talking about fixed prices, was that what do you think that meant? What did that refer to?
Yeah, I don't know if I picked up fixed prices. I think it was more about a fair funding allocation. Look, we have got some fixed prices already with under sixes or community services card holders, and that's actually proved to sting us over time because they put funding in to make it reasonably attractive for you to go into that contract, and then they gradually throttle you. And so those fixed prices are becoming a very difficult thing. ACC is the same. They do that in some instances. So yes, we definitely don't. If we have fixed prices, we have no way of balancing the books if things aren't done right, and it'll jeopardise the provision of general practice care in our communities, which is already jeopardised. So we were against that, and I don't know that that's the intention. I think it's more to get a fair price increase, and it's a pathway that's going to be better in the future. That's how I took the announcement.
I mean, I'm all for a sustainable funding system. I mean, you're in the mix of it, so you understand it best. But I thought about too setting up this independent pricing authority, which is supposedly apolitical. It would cost tens of, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars, considering the need for specialist staff. You'd need secure IT systems, ongoing analysis, governance structures, because it's talking about transparency and independence. I mean, where's that money coming from? It's a great idea, possibly, but to set it up, you guys might not get any money because the money's going into setting it up.